This is Ryanne Bennett of the Black Girl Nerds podcast, and you're listening to Open Pike Night. Finally, a white guy nerd podcast. Wait, guys, who wrote this script?
Is this thing on? Hello, hello. Welcome to Open Pike Night, the Strange New Worlds podcast where your personal logs are our prime directive. I'm your host, John T. Bolds, here tonight with some amazing guests on stage and in the studio to discuss Episode 2 of Strange New Worlds Season 2 at Astra per Aspera. Join us tonight as we discuss which Open Pike Night host will pick the best lawyer, whether we like our legal dramas procedural or emotional, and if we would want to know what tricks the defense attorney already had up her sleeve if we were on trial. Joining me today are my co-hosts, the man who would do anything to get to Mars, including getting chased by pirates and fighting space baboons, host of Sudden But Inevitable, Jesse.
If it is a crime to fight pirates and get chased by space baboons whilst loving every incarnation of Star Trek with your whole heart, then indeed I am guilty as charged.
And the man who's ready to travel to the edge of our solar system so much that he would swim underwater to hijack a deep space ship, accidentally murder the crew, and go crazy for a little while. Host of Green Shirt and Newbies Track Through TNG, Cameron.
Is that a Europa Report reference?
Those were both Ad Astra references, the Brad Pitt, Tommy Lee Jones.
Okay. Well, in that case, look, John, it's not my nature to be mysterious, but I can't talk about it, and I can't talk about why.
And tonight we have a special guest, very special guest. Ryanne Bennett from the Black Girl Nerds podcast is joining us here to discuss Strange New Worlds. Ryan, tell us a little bit about your Trek history.
Man, first of all, that intro, like baboons underwater, like the music, I don't even know what I'm supposed to say. I just don't feel cool enough, but it's fine. You know, I'm just gonna keep going, do what I gotta do. But wow, that's crazy. Anyway, so all right, my Trek as a Trekkie. So basically, I'm kind of riding in between, I would say, Star Wars and Star Trek. And let me defend myself, or people hit me up with the comments here. Because when I first started with Star Wars, I could not follow along. I tried my dad tried to get me when I was a little kid to kind of get into it. And he was showing me every kind of movie. And I was like, I don't know the order. I don't know the sequence. I had to wait to Mandalorian to actually get into it. So what happened was, I was like, before Mandalorian, I was like, look, I can't do it. I keep trying to figure out what order the movies go in, what character I'm supposed to follow, what's going on. But in 2000, like early 2000s, when they did the remake, came out with the first Star Trek with Chris Pine, Zoe Saldana, I was hooked. I loved, I can't remember the actor that played Spock, but I think it was Zachary Quinto, I think it was, or something. Fantastic. Like, I just fell in love with that whole cast in that role, in those roles, and it was so easy for me to follow. I was like, I mean, you got the one guy that doesn't really have like the personality, but it's funny, and he gets the girl. And then you got the one guy that's like the player that's like hitting on everything walking. It was just so easy for me to focus in and follow these characters, because if I get a character that I like, I'm hooked. I can watch whatever movie, I can continue with the show. If I love the character, they got me. So that's my quick intro of how I became a Trekkie.
Nice.
Very cool.
Right. Yeah. Well, excellent. Well, we have 16 calls tonight. Our callers were very invested in this, including, I believe, 3 new additions to the Open Pike Night Stage for their first time. So let's start with one of those. Here is Dee. Welcome to the Open Pike Night Stage.
Okay, hi, it's Dee. I just finished the episode. It was an amazing episode. I always love court-martial episodes, and it hits all of the spots for my brain. I'm obsessed with everybody involved. Una and Mira and Patel, like, just all of it. I love that. Also, we called it in fucking like July of last year in one of the discussions following her arrest that she fucking turned herself in. Fucking knew it. But it's like a top 10 episode for sure. Yeah, fuck the fucking bald admiral guy. I don't like him. This episode was great, and I'm so excited for next week. Like, this felt like peak Strange New Worlds. Okay, bye.
All right, Dee, thank you for calling in. I think we'll first hit the theories, the conspiracy, and Una turning herself in, because that has been something we've been talking about for a long time.
Who was it?
I know I was wrong. I knew I thought it was going to be a third party, but how'd you guys feel about Una putting herself on trial, really?
It does really seem to fit with what we would expect from a Starfleet officer, right? Like, you want Starfleet characters to be doing the right thing. And I know that we had definitely mentioned that in a discussion, but I'll be honest, the way that this episode was written, I thought it was going to be La'an. I really did, because I was like, man, she's definitely got some feelings going on here. Maybe she, out of anger, she did something. But I mean, that twist of it not being La'an got me. And I think that primed me to be surprised for the Una twist, because it does make logical sense, but I didn't get there, guys. I was like, oh, great. Like, of course. But I was definitely surprised.
I thought Leon was going to, I forgot about her confessional video. So I thought when she mentioned that, I was going to say, oh, okay, we're done. That explains it. That's the plot. But yeah, I wasn't even thinking that Una is just super gutsy. And you always forget like how much she's just like, I'm going to face this head on. I'm not going to be scared. I'm going to do what I got to do. You always forget that about her. And then I was like, she turned herself in. What? What is she doing? Because I've been on the edge of my seat since last season. Like, is she going to come back? They need her. He needs number one. You can't leave Captain Pike out there without his number one. So he needs somebody. So yeah, they played this so well for me. I was totally lost and into the moment. I had no idea she was going to reveal that was her. So my mouth was just open. I was just like, it's so well played by the lawyer. Mira did that so well. I was like, how in the world do you you fabricate that so well, where it was just like, she was like, okay, well, how about you tell me a little bit more about that? And then, you have like the judges there, of Starfleet, like, oh my, well, what do we say after that? Like, she was trying to get asylum. Like, what do we got after that? It was just so well played. Like, and I agree with the caller. 100% my favorite episode, even from last season, 100%, because it was just so much. And I thought, it was crazy because there was no action. And usually, like, I'm the action person. Like, I want to see the fights. I want to see the battles. But it was just so, like, it had me from beginning to end.
Not one phaser. Was there a phaser?
Not one phaser. I couldn't believe it.
I think so, yeah.
And to Dee's point, yes, Pasalk was beautifully played, the Vulcan judge advocate general guy.
We'll get to him. Yeah.
He was masterfully casted, because he said maybe 5 lines, and we're all like, I hate that guy.
Yep. Yeah. Can't stand him.
Yeah, I think this is a great question to start on. I feel like the episode has 4 kind of big conflicts or points of drama in it that the first half sets up. We have, how is Una going to get out of this? How is she going to get out? We all know she's going to get out. That's not a question, but how? We have who turned her in, who done it. We have, what was Nira and Una's beef? What's this backstory we keep hearing about? And then we have, where's Nira's priorities? Is she really on Una's side? How's this going to play out? I feel like those are the 4 big conflicts. Yeah, who turned her in? I didn't really buy it. I understand the writers coming in here and being like, what's the most dramatic choice for who did it? Oh, well, if she did it herself, that's interesting. But like, she wants to be in Starfleet. She is risking 20 years in prison to still be in Starfleet. Maybe let them know that you're confessing. Maybe don't put in a secret tip. Like, I just don't get that. It doesn't make any sense why she wouldn't.
My only pushback on that would be that she is clearly worried about how her case may affect her crewmates, right?
Right. Yeah.
So she doesn't want them to get pulled in, and
But this feels more likely to pull them in.
Yeah, but it's plausible deniability, right? Like, if Pike actually can't do anything because she told him directly, but for the rest of them, if they were put on the stand and said who turned Una in, they wouldn't be able to go, oh, it was her, or oh, we knew about it, but something. I think it was. I hear where you're coming from, but I think it was sort of meant to be like, she's trying to keep everybody safe, but it's not invalid.
Okay, I'll take it. If Jesse says it's not invalid, it's a win for me.
Yeah, I was like, okay, it's definitely, she's trying to protect the crew, but I wish there had been a little bit more of a layer to it as to the concrete reasons why in this episode are few and far between. I don't dislike this episode, but I don't know if I share the love that we have from a lot of our callers. So let's hear from another one of those. Zoe is returning to the Open Pike Night Stage.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Open Pike Night. This is Zoe Richardson of the USS Cinema, also the host of Backlick Cinema, the podcast. And what can I say? I love a trial episode. Don't you love a trial episode? Who doesn't love a trial episode? And this one is one of the best ever. Now, I know that there are going to be certain people that are going to kind of compare it to A Measure of a Man, but this asks a slightly different question. And I love the questions that it asks. And it does a great job of doing what Star Trek does. It holds a mirror up to society through the lens of a sci-fi backdrop. And it says, look at yourself. Do you like what you see? You ought to be ashamed of yourself. And I didn't recognize Yetide Badaki from American Gods, and it was such an amazing performance. Yes. It was scrumptious. And Spock continues to give us the funniest moments of the episode. So, and I love the way it was resolved. It was resolved with a little white lie, but as I've always said, you can't explore the star system without fracturing the Prime Directive at least a couple of times. So, little white lie, I'm all right with that. Richardson out.
All right, Zoe, thank you once again for bringing some excellent points and
always
bringing your voice back to the Open Pike Night Stage.
I was gonna say, was that like mute? Like, was he on the Enterprise? Was that like music or something? Like, what was that?
Captain Zoe always bringing the production quality.
I'm not ready for this production quality. This stuff is amazing. Man, all right. Well,
he does make us look better.
All right, right? That's what I'm saying. Like, that guy's mad cool. It's really cool. I guess I'll talk about Yetide
Badaki.
Yetide Badaki. Okay. I was like, I'm definitely gonna butcher her name, but yeah, I remember for her American Gods, and she was insane on that show. Like, she was eating men, and it was crazy. So I forgot all about that. Like, she was going in on that show. So that explains like the powerhouse that she is. Cause I kept trying to figure that out watching the episode. I was like, who is this woman? Like, she came in this one episode and to me kind of completely took it over.
But the first scene with her, I mean, one, she's going up against Pike, and that's a challenge right there. And just knocks it out of the park. Yeah, from the first scene, you know, like this is going to be someone to watch.
Yeah, she was
character
fun.
And actor.
The level of true commitment that you could see on her face was just like, man, I really am glad that they picked somebody who understood the emotional weight of this script, right? It's not just a legal drama. It's like a hugely important humanistic theme. And I have been on Twitter since this episode came out saying, Emmy, we need an Emmy for Yetide Badaki, because wow. I was, to your point, Ryan, I was like, I don't need more time with the crew that I know right now. I need to know what happens next in the courtroom.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I like that we're talking about the actor before the performance, because she in the first scene with Pike, like, she makes him seem smaller, like Captain freaking Pike, and she is zero impressed by anything he's done. Like, I don't care. You wore a mask here. You almost suffocated yourself. You traveled across the system for days. No, not interested. And you know, it's obviously he had to convince her to come do it. But yeah, her performance is just like, wow. This is an outstanding show for a Star Trek guest star.
Well, they are equals, but they're coming at it with such different strategies and perspectives. It's a great scene to watch. I mean, every scene in this episode, like, I'm going to have some critiques, but every scene alone is just amazingly crafted.
Yes.
And I love how Battelle is like, no speeches this time, Chris. Someone else is giving the inspiring speeches.
She goes, I know how you hate them.
And she fucking nails it. In a show about like the captain giving inspiring speeches, she rises to the occasion.
Yeah.
Was anybody else
Absolutely.
cringing when Pike was like couldn't breathe at all? Like I was just like, what is going
I
on?
loved it. Yeah.
Oh man, there has not been a game of chicken that intense since Footloose. Like I just want to put some "Holding Out for a Hero" soundtrack behind it.
Yeah,
just
like
him
it
and the
was
secretary
so
staring
bad. I
each
was
other
like,
down.
what is he
Yeah.
doing? I was like, you can't kill yourself trying to get her out of jail. Like, what are you doing?
Well, you just know that Pike is like, this is not how I die, so I'm going to sit here. I know this number is not going to reach 0 on me.
That is true.
Thank you for bringing that up,
Yeah.
Cam, because I'm curious if they're going to start, and this is a bigger Strange New Worlds question overall, like, is he going to start taking bigger and bigger risks? Because he does, as long as it's just himself at risk, are people going to be like, Pike's kind of insane lately? Have you noticed that he'll go into these
Interesting, yeah.
death-defying acts and just zero fear whatsoever?
I felt episode 4 was maybe of season 1 was maybe our first
Yes.
indicator of that, because he kept
I'll
saying,
agree
I
with
have
that.
faith in the Enterprise.
Yeah.
I have
Go
faith
deeper.
in the crew.
It will be fine. I know
Yeah.
this is not how I die, so I'm hoping it's not how everybody else dies.
Oh man, he's invincible. Everybody watch out.
Pretty much, yeah. Here is our next caller, Jesse from Alaska, returning to the Open Pike Night Stage.
Hey, this is Jessie from Alaska. I totally was digging that this was a civil rights case, and it's a different type of civil rights case. I mean, we don't have anything about genetically modified people at this point, and I think it really says something about the Star Trek future, because a lot of people think that Star Trek is this utopian society that we should strive for, but things like this help kind of poke holes in that. I think that's important because Star Trek is always relevant, an obtainable futuristic goal for all of mankind and all of alien kind, you know. I really love the little details on the dress uniforms that they wore in court. My eyes just kind of focused on that little gold trim that they all had. I did like a little bit of the buddy action, like between Ortegas and Mbenga when they were looking at Spock. I thought that was like solid gold, because I do that all the time. Usually I do it in my head, but whatever. It was very relatable, and I loved it.
Jesse from Alaska, lending her voice once again to us. Let's go with the Ortegas and Benga scene and fun little comic relief, but just, hey, these guys don't have much to do, so let's give them a fun scene.
Yeah, this was very much like, this is not the cruise episode, so let's give these actors something to do.
Yeah. And it's interesting to me that, so far it's like, okay, well, I mean, I can't remember if Chapel has more than one line, if any lines in this episode.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see after such an Mbenga heavy episode, we get Mbenga back again, giving us more an insight into another character that, of course, we're not supposed to recognize, that Spock is tense and they're having a really awful conversation over there. But it's fun that they used Mbenga for that.
I love it. I think I had mentioned in our spoiler-free review how much I love how they use Spock in season 2. And if you like this scene, it's a lot. They really know how to use Spock for the humor, and I think this is a great comedic Spock scene. I think it stays true to the character, where he goes and where he's at now.
And speaking of comedic Spock scenes and things that we totally called from the trailer, we totally called that Spock would say Una has been hiding her love for Gilbert and Sullivan. Like, we called that months ago, before we even had screeners, folks. Like, it's just such a perfect moment to tie all of continuity together for the people that are worried about it. And actually, to that point, I really appreciate that this episode, where they show the court-martial judges say, like, look, we're not changing the rules. We're making an exception for Una, because that leaves everything else intact. That leaves some DS9 storylines intact. It leaves all of TOS intact. Like, I am continuously impressed with these showrunners, despite knowing there are moments where story is more important than canon, which I fully believe, are still making an effort to keep some of those people happy, because it only takes a little throwaway line. And Spock this season is special. Ethan Peck is fast becoming one of my favorite actors. I can't wait to see what else he does next.
He does a great Spock. Yeah, he's very believable. It's got you questioning. It's like, as humans, can we add a little bit more, like, straightforward and like being realistic to our everyday lives, because he plays it so well. Like I love when he got up from the table, was like, I'm sorry you hadn't witnessed that. And we have no idea. Like, we were just sitting there looking at his I was like, I lost it. I was laughing so hard, but he is so serious. And like you said, the comedic timing is just great. And then I like Ortegas and Mbega just cracking up, because they're just like, I told you they did not like each other. And like, with the both of them too, it's that serious, because one's a doctor, one's a pilot, and Ortega, she always has that personality that I think you need because she's always the one that's in some of the most dangerous situations. Like, she's got to get them out of there quick. Like, if they're getting ready to get sucked into a wormhole, she's got to come up with a move quick. So I like how she always has like different funny names for things, and her personality is always leading, like, whatever intense situation they're in right now, and everything is shown on her face, which I think is great. I'm always looking at like actors' faces. It's like, if they're not saying anything, sometimes you can read like all the emotion like right there as they're going through it. I think that character does that so well.
Well, let's hear from another returning caller. Here is another Jessie from Crusher Convo.
Hey guys, it's Jessie from Crusher Convo. I am struggling with the words on how I felt about today's episode. They absolutely crushed it. I really enjoyed how this episode focused heavily on Pike and Una, because they were not there in the last episode, so it was a nice balance. And I said this last year, that their friendship reminds me so much of Crusher. They rely on each other, they're there for one another, and will do anything for the other. Very nice, and I loved it. The ending. I was in tears, and I don't cry that easily, but how the entire episode came full circle in the end was insane. So good. Beverly once said that we struggle all our lives to answer it, and that it's the struggle that is important, and that's what helps us define our place in the universe. She was talking about the meaning of life, but I feel that quote works here because we struggle to know what is right and what is wrong, and it takes us to find a better way, to pave a better future for everyone. It was just a really good message, and I just loved it. I want to give the writers a huge shout out, because thanks to them, we got this wonderful story, and no AI can replace them. WGA strong, right guys? Thanks for listening. Crusher out.
I'd say the only difference between Crusher and Pike Una is that Pike is perfectly willing to show emotion.
Picuna. Great.
Yeah, let's
great
talk
comments,
about
Jesse.
Pike. Yeah, and let's talk about Pike in this episode, because it was, we got to see basically the opening of the episode is the word meanwhile during last week's episode, and then just showing Pike walking across that planet and, sitting in a shuttle for 5 days, I'm guessing. But after that, he kind of then, we get his story with Battelle, and I think that's probably something we should focus on its own. But like, as outside of that, like, Pike does that, and then he sits back once again for another episode of Strange New Worlds by, for a very good reason, and it is explained why. But how'd you feel about that?
I felt like Pike had enough to do in this episode. I mean, a lot of the crew gets sidelined in this episode, and I'm not going to ding the episode for that, but there were parts where I thought the crew was going to help solve the mystery when like La'an and Uhura had their scene. That's kind of when I was most invested during the first watch. And then I think on the second watch, I was like, okay, this isn't their story. I think Pike had enough to do. I loved all of his scenes. I loved his scenes with Battelle, loved his scene with April. We can talk more about that. I know you love that, John. Yeah. I loved the shot in Neera's office where he's got angel wings. That was framed very purposefully. Loved that. I thought Pike was good.
Yeah.
Hot take.
Yeah. Pike was definitely good. I think in this episode, he was in the right places that he needed to be. And for some reason, Pike is strangely good at reading people. I feel like, him and Mira had this thing going on in the office where he was like, if I could just get her to bite, if I could just get this to work, I can chill, because I know I really want to help Una. I know I need to say something, but, April comes in and she's like, you do it if you want to, but you're on trial too. So I think he's like, okay, if I just need one person to understand, to see what I see in Una, I need somebody to fight for her, somebody that I know has a connection, and I can just sit back and ride this out. I might need a little drink as I'm going through, but I can ride this out, because she'll be okay if I can just get that one person to get on the train and realize what I see. So I thought that's where I kind of saw his role at for this episode. And I feel like he's gonna, I feel like as the captain, he's gonna chill out for a little bit. Maybe the stakes get a little higher as we go, but he's invincible. He's the Boy Scout, so he's gonna kind of ride it for a little bit and kind of see where he needs to fit in. I feel like, because the crew is tight. Like everybody that's what I love about this cast and this crew. Like everybody knows where they fit, right? So it's like you kind of don't have to do a lot sometimes. Like they kind of they're either gonna get themselves in a whole bunch of trouble, and you're like, hopefully they'll get out eventually, and then hopefully Pike doesn't have to come save them, but. They're getting pretty good. They're getting pretty good at figuring out how to work themselves out of these little angles. So yeah, I like Pike in this episode. I was like, let him get a little drink and chill out for a little bit.
My two favorite Pike scenes in this, definitely the confrontation with Patel. I didn't know I could be afraid of Anson Mount. Like when he's pointing a knife at her and saying, "I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed," right? Like Una should be here doing her job, and it's your fault that she's not. He knows that that's illogical and emotional. And a little bit unfair. And I love that they gave her the line, "Chris, don't be a child. You know that I'm just doing my job." It's like that's some serious humility to lob at a Star Trek captain at all. But for it to be Captain Pike and for him to accept that and realize she's right, I think really goes to that positive masculinity we were talking about last week with Pike. And then my other favorite scene of his is actually right before he goes to meet up April, because all of the crew is looking at him like, what is he going to do? And are we in trouble now? And like, what is going on? And he just keeps dad face and stands up and walks out of the room like, all right, I'm going to go deal with grandpa. And then, but it's those little tiny moments for me that really solidify that this guy knows how to be a leader, right? He's not freaking out in front of everybody. He's not going, okay, what do we do? He's like, this is my bed. I will sleep in it. And you will all be fine.
That's it. That's a great version of it. Yeah, because to Ryan's point, like he's confident she's the right one, but then throughout the episode, you see these moments where he's like, "Oh shit, did I make a mistake?" Like April calls him out on it. You see it on his face, like you said. But to your point, Jesse, like that never. He does the next right thing, to quote Frozen 2. That's what makes Pike great. Two other quick points: the scene with Patel. He throws the carrot at the end, and I'm a parent because I was like, "Come on, Pike, pick that up. Go pick that carrot up. Don't leave that on the floor."
It's a replicated carrot. It doesn't degrade the same way. It's okay.
If you throw a replicated carrot into a holographic fire, what happens?
That's where I was like, "Why didn't you throw it in the fire, man? There's a fire right there, and that would be super dramatic." Like,
and then Jesse, you point out, Patel says, "Let me do my job." What is her job? Why is a random starship captain prosecuting
also a
Una?
Lawyer? Yeah, like is her ship like a Lincoln lawyer, basically? Like is she going around planet to planet representing people that need it? Like
it's the USS McConaughey.
I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
Okay, USS McConaughey's our next T-shirt design. This is going to be a long show.
No, that's a trope I can ignore. That's a sci-fi trial trope where the most dramatic person is for some reason the prosecutor.
So the actual production reason, Cam, to your point, is probably, as we were told by Henry Alonzo Myers when we interviewed him, go check out our backlog, is that they were actually so impressed with Melanie Scrofano's performance in season 1 that they wrote more stuff for her in season 2. So I could see where they would go, well, if she arrested her, she's got to have some legal standing of some kind, right? But I'm with you. It's like, how many jobs can one Starfleet captain have? Like, come on.
Yeah.
And with that, like I like that Pike wasn't part of the defense. I like that Pike and the rest of the crew weren't all right there in the courtroom sitting and watching. I liked that they kind of, for a sci-fi show set in the future in space, it's like, oh, this is actually kind of a realistic legal drama, because what do? They get to sit and watch it on TV and not really have anything to do. Yep. So.
And great redress of the Federation HQ set from Discovery. I'll just throw that out there.
Nerd.
Very big nerd. Anyway, let's hear from another big Star Trek nerd returning to the Open Pike Night Stage.
Hi, this is Tessa. First, great to see all these strong, powerful, fun, exciting women. Oh my god, Batel, Nira, Una being a girl boss, getting to see Nyota and La'an. Oh my god, there were so many good parts of it. Second, I grew up reading a lot of the X-Men comics. It was one of my favorites. And at one point noticed that they pretty directly referenced original X-Men, which is really interesting because this was clearly a racial civil rights allegory or a queer rights allegory, either or both. And the original X-Men was a civil rights allegory. So it was really cool to see them reference that, especially because I don't think that for most people they're intrinsically connected. Third, we get to see Erica Ortegas and Joseph Mbenga getting lunch together, and Erica making fun of Spock. And I just know that she owed Mbenga like $20 after that engagement. I just really liked it. I thought this is a really good episode, and it made me really excited for the rest of the season. I stand by what I said last week about how this should have been the pilot because it was so much better to me than season 2, episode 1 was. 30 out of 10, would recommend. I love courtroom drama so much.
Yes.
Bye, I love you guys.
Bye, Tess.
Tessa, thank you very much for calling in. Go dry your eyes. Thank you. I do want to thank all of our amazing callers. Again, Open Pike Night would not be what it is without our fans, without our callers, without our patrons. I mean, we have amazing people supporting us and supporting the independent Star Trek podcast. So thank you to Pam, Marhana, Shatterhand, Mark, and Steve, our 25-minute set patrons. Let's talk about Uhura and La'an and their role in getting this trial finished.
Let me first say, Tessa, that is one of my favorite calls ever. Like, you guys know me. I want there to just be unbridled, to the brim enthusiasm for all Star Trek, and I really feel you've brought that this week, so thank you. And I think that your point about the entire cast is very, very good. Just as we've mentioned, we don't get a ton of time with them, but even in these little vignettes, like these 3 minutes that we get on the bridge with La'an and Uhura, there is so much going on. The dynamic, which again, Celia and Chrissy both mentioned in their interview with us. They said, we had this moment in episode 2 where I thought Uhura wouldn't stand up to La'an like that. And the director, Valerie Weiss, helped her, work that out. And what a job they did, because that moment is so good. And it really does strike like Celia said it would, which was you finally get the approval of that coach that was always riding you and would never say good job. And for Uhura to get that out of La'an by telling her no, that felt like a twist to me, right? Like the twist is no, she's not going to help you because you trained her not to. Like this is, I love that moment. Thank you for bringing that up.
I really appreciated that it was another trope. It was another, I'm gonna get to the bottom of this trope for a legal drama. And it was like, no, stop being an idiot. You're probably going to ruin things.
You're not a lawyer.
Follow the rules and let the lawyers do their work. And it was a fun subverting of that.
I am glad Ortegas did not have to rush into the courtroom at the last second, waving a piece of paper. Like, I've got the evidence right here. Yeah, I'm glad they avoided that.
Yeah, Yor and Leon, like, I remember when I got to talk to those two ladies, I told them about being bosses. I was like, I love any scene that they're in, because even if it's like 5 seconds, the way they command and the way they're not afraid to take chances. She was like, look, I understand what you're trying to do. We all want Una back, but we got to do this the right way, because everybody could, like, we can't just have everybody and their mama going down for what's going on. Like, we got to keep the crew together. Like, if we can save somebody, let's keep the crew together. So I like how she was like, look, I'll help you, but we're going to have to do this another way. It's not going to go down like this. And, Leanne coming from the defense, that's almost, that's somebody she looks up to, probably more than a friend to her. And she's like, I got to do, like, I can't just sit here. I think it's my responsibility. I got to do something. So, and, to see her do that, because she rarely has those emotions. She's like, she could be, almost close to like to Spock as you can get, I guess, on a human level, where she's like, I got a job I got to do. I got to keep my emotions out of it. But lately, she's getting very emotional about this. She's like, this is my family. Like, this is my team. Like, I got to do something. And I thought that was so funny for her. Like, the whole episodes, everybody's like, okay, calm down, relax. And she's usually like the one like, no, okay, we can handle this procedure. Like, I just got to get my gun. I put my suit on. I got this. But the whole time she's like, this is my fault. I shouldn't have said anything. What do I do if she goes down? Like, just to see those emotions poured out of her, and that it switches so suddenly and so early in this new season. It's just a, a compliment to the actress, and just a compliment to like the way they are writing this and playing this out so beautifully that we get to see these steps.
I have to bring up the scene between Nira and La'an. Outside of the courtroom, that's easily my favorite scene in this entire episode.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because it almost directly parallels the conversation that Angel had with Spock in season 1. They're basically just going through like, hey, genetics is genetics, okay? That doesn't have anything to do with who you are. You could actually see on Christina Chong's face like a moment of realization, right? Like, oh, you're right. Everybody could be terrible or everybody could be great. Like, I guess I never really thought of it like that. And it was, I mean, not to spoil anything, but there are some powerhouse Christina Chong performances this season. And I would say this is probably the first one that made me sit up and take notice. She's an absolute star.
Yeah. Pay attention, because I mean, this is not an isolated thing. It's part of the journey for her. Yeah, I love that. I mean, she has the closest to a B story in this episode, right? Mm-hmm. Because that scene is really the only scene that doesn't tie in with Una's court martial. And I love that they were able to give her the character that moment, because Nira was a great person to have that conversation with. So, I mean, that felt perfect for me.
I would believe anything Nira told me. Like,
right. Yeah. And then the other thing Tess brought up was the X-Men connection, which I also made because I was just showing my son Atreyu the X-Men movies, the original ones, and going, oh, Rebecca Romaine almost has the exact same line in this episode and X-Men. I don't want to hide anymore. And that was kind of like chills. I was like, oh, wow.
But what happens when you strike a toad with lightning?
Same thing that happens to everything else.
And then literally 2 minutes after one of the worst lines of cinema history, you have Wolverine calling Cyclops a dick to prove his identity. And it's like one of the best lines of movie history.
And giving him a blade middle finger. This is a perfect little scene right here. All right.
Gotta love X-Men.
Well, let's get back on track with our next caller, who actually really ties into it, some of what you were just talking about, Cam.
Greetings, Open Pike. This is Kelly Zent-Georgi, or Antipodal on Twitter.
Hey, Kelly.
Wow, Star Trek Strange New Worlds is cooking on all 4 burners so far in Season 2. Ad Astra per Aspera is an exquisite, reaffirming, glorious episode. In the trailer for this episode, Spock, on the witness stand, answers Captain Patel's question, "Did you ever get the sense that Commander Chin Riley was hiding something?" with, "Yes, I did get the sense that she was hiding something." However, for anyone who watched the Star Trek Discovery Season 2 Short Trek Q&A would know that there was more than one item that Una could be hiding. 1. Una had made a most careful study of Captain Pike. 2. Una told Spock that the strength of a Starfleet crew is in its diversity and differences, and that Una would never ask a crew member to suppress or conceal their nature. 3. Una has an affinity for Gilbert and Sullivan musicals that appeared to be the first indication of the revelation of Commander Chin Riley as an Illyrian. Last, but certainly not least, actor Yetide Badaki gifted us with a powerful and marvelous performance. Welcome to the Star Trek family. Thank you, Open Pike. Best wishes for Season 2 podcasts, and hailing frequencies are closed.
Kelly, thank you for calling in. Kelly did call in last week. If you didn't hear her on the main episode, go ahead and check out our Become a Patron and check out our feed. Any folks we have to cut for time, we do respond to their calls on the patron bonus for every episode. I really like Kelly's deep dive on the short trek there, and man, does that short trek mean so much more than it did when it first aired because of this episode. I think that's a fantastic point. Did any of you go back and watch that after this?
So, surprise. I did. I always thought the short treks were just so much fun, and I really wish we would get some more of those. But this actually, to your point, John, this just goes back to what I think I have been saying, and maybe we collectively have been saying about Strange New Worlds since it started, which is it actively makes other episodes of Star Trek better. Like, what more could you ask for from a prequel series, really?
I do hate to disagree with you, Kelly, but Captain Pike's quarters, he actually only cooks on one burner, and then the rest is like a glass top grill, it looks like. I just Googled it. Apologies.
Continuity of apron, though. That's important. If you sign up as a patron for as little as $2 a month, you can win a signed apron by Anson Mount and Ethan Peck. Just throwing it out there.
Are you familiar with the short trick, Ryan?
I'm not. I'm going to say that's something else I got to add to my watch list. I was like, she was dropping many like Easter eggs. I was like, I need to figure out what she's talking about. I need to go watch this.
Yeah. It's an easy 5-minute watch.
Hashtag Mortegas, hashtag Safe Prodigy, hashtag new caller to the Open Pike Night Stage.
Ooh.
Hello, Open Pike Night. This is Trip Lives from at DS9 Club on Twitter with thoughts about Season 2, Episode 2. I enjoy a Trek trial/courtroom episode. The callback to the menagerie, card in the computer reads out the charges. That was cool. Then some parallels to A Measure of a Man with Captain Prosecutor being Pike's casual girlfriend. Didn't really buy the tension between them, not as much as that sassy admiral who had the hots for Picard in TNG. What did work was the tension within and around La'an, even better than forcing Riker to prosecute Data. La'an and Uhura facing off about the personal logs, La'an working with attorneys, struggling with the guilt. She might have been the ones who spilled the beans about Una. My eyes were welling up in that scene. Everything La'an worked for me in this one. Vulcan prosecutors spewing conspiracy theories and threatening to turn the whole thing into the drumhead. Tied into the story, but it was a little too much. The recurring theme for this season is trying to do too much, as you guys already mentioned. I do like how the individual case exception kind of prequels Julian Bashir's own genetic engineering case. I could go on, but to close, I fall in love with his crew. Even early in the show, I feel they are my second favorite Trek crew of all times, only second to DS9, and I can't get enough of them. Be seeing you.
All right. I think it's time to talk about our bald Vulcan buddy and ignore any comments about DS9 characters that Cam might have just heard.
Right.
I can't wait to watch more DS9.
So we'll hear some more mentions of him as the calls go on. I am mostly curious why he was talking to Spock at the beginning, like why his introduction was having a tense conversation with Spock, with a subordinate officer in Starfleet.
Well, my guess is that it was a courtesy, right? Because Pasulk knows Sarek, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Spock.
So it was probably a like.
And they knew each other. Spock implied that they've met before. So.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Because Spock has known him for a long time and disliked him for a long time. And it sounds like it could have something to do with his father. Now, I'm just going to speculate that Pasulk probably tried to make it illegal for Sarek and Amanda to get married because that feels like something Pasulk would do to me. Pasulk. And maybe that's why Spock doesn't like him.
How'd you feel about him, Ryan?
Yeah, I don't like the guy. I was like, he's doing a lot. It's like after you prove a certain point, and I thought it was all wrapped up, and then he pulls out the one law, and I'm like, dude, you gotta be kidding me right now. I was like, come on. I was like, obviously, it's not like she hasn't done what she needs to do as a member of the Enterprise, as a number one, in that slot. She's done her job, right? It's like everything they tried to come up with, this guy was like ready. Like he was just pissed, like she had slashed his tires or something. Like he was just going in, for no reason. I was like, come on. I was like, at some point you just got to be done. And that's why I love when Mira was like, okay, well, you want to talk about laws? Hold on, let me flip to this one page on you real quick. And I was just like, yes, I was on the edge of my seat. I was so excited because I thought he was going to get away with it. I was like, you got to be kidding me. This whole episode. I was like, come on, dude, what is going on?
Because she sets the book down like in front of him, right?
Yeah. It had the little marker in it. Yeah, so badass.
Yeah, to Jesse's point earlier, like he doesn't have a lot of lines, but he conveys a lot. The moment where he like taps Patel's shoulder when he realizes Patel's not like objecting at the right time, such a good moment. Just tells you so much about everyone at that table.
And when she goes to stand up and he puts the hand on her shoulder, like, don't worry, I got this. I was like, man, that's so condescending.
Your work here's done.
Wow.
Let a real Vulcan.
I wonder if he's meant to just be a personification of the systemic prejudice that exists in even Starfleet of all organizations, right? Like, here's a guy who's clinging so strongly to process And,
Yeah.
you know, I almost felt like he was an indictment of the, well, I'd be fine if they had just followed the law crowd. Like, this is the character that shows you, like, yeah, that's not good enough. Like, you need to have nuance in the legal system for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
Well, to add to Tripp's excellent examples of previous Star Trek trial episodes, he reminded me a lot of the Vulcan in Wesley's trial in the first Duty.
Yeah.
Duty.
And actually, one more parallel. I love that Nira was able to use a physical book to close this case, which is got to be a direct callback to the TOS episode, The Court Martial, where Samuel T. Cogley is like, I don't trust computers. The computers are wrong. The law is in books. You got to trust books, young man. So it was like this little tiny continuing thread of like all Starfleet lawyers love books.
Yeah. And great eye, eagle eye on the computer reading out the charges. I'd completely forgotten that from the menagerie till Tripp said, I'm like, oh, such a great subtle, like they're not in your face about the TOS callbacks on this show. They do it just like slide it in there. So if you remember it, you do. If not, you're not missing out on anything. And I think they just wanted to have a villain for the courtroom drama, but I'm very glad he didn't go all drumhead talking about his father at the end of he didn't have a Vulcan breakdown.
He stuck within the parameters of what a lawyer would still do. Right. It's just like, is this lawyer, a human, or are they all about the book? Right. Like,
let's hear from another returning caller. Here is Mariah on the Open Pike Night Stage.
Hi, Open Pike Night. It's Mariah. I think one of the things that Star Trek does so well is explores challenges, oppressions, social dynamics of our world by putting it in a different context so we can think differently about it. And I think that you can map a lot of systems of oppression onto the Illyrians. But the thing that really got me and felt very personal was the idea of Una passing and therefore hiding. And as a very femme-presenting queer woman, queer cis woman, I don't get read as queer very often. And I think in this time when there's a lot of threats to our very existence, it's really easy for me to pass and hide. And I've been thinking a lot about that in general, and there was something about this episode that just made me want to not, and to say, I'm here, I take up space, and I want you to see me for exactly who I am, and not who you expect me to be. Live long and prosper.
This is my favorite part of Open Pike Night, you guys. We are so privileged to be able to share this vulnerability with people that when they call in, this is what our show is about. It's about you, the caller, and the Star Trek community. And Mariah has exemplified that every time she calls in. But wow, thank you. That is beautiful.
That feeling, those last 20 seconds, what she said, it's like, oh, so she just read us Una's internal monologue before she sent in the message to turn herself in. It's like, I can't even imagine how difficult it is. I sit here with a ton of privilege, and I'm glad to have voices like Mariah's join us on Open Pike Night, because it does enrich our community, and it is good to hear those words said out loud and not just be like, oh, academically I know this, but it's nice to have other people who are willing to share.
Yeah. I mean, that's why we have the calls in. Obviously, us three white cis dudes could not offer that perspective. So,
to her point, though, about the multi-layered allegory here, I've seen a little bit of criticism of this episode online, which definitely caught me off guard. But the criticism that I have seen kind of relies on, why does the episode rely so heavily on allegory instead of maybe a more full-throated support of something or a societal critique? And I feel like that's 100% a valid point, right? My feeling on it, though, is that the multi-layered allegory is designed to help illustrate that none of us is just one thing. and all of us are worth seeing beyond the surface of. And when Nira makes her final revelation that Una has followed the rules and asked for asylum within the framework, you could see the veil coming off of the court's eyes, right? Like, oh, she's totally right. If a law is unjust, then we can't be trusted to dispense justice. And that's a personal revelation that they have to have. And, you know, one step further than that, Nira actually says the law is not a mirror to society. It's an ideal. And I think that's why they chose allegory here, because ideals must be communicated subtly sometimes and with nuance, because that is kind of the only presentational way that some people will accept that message, right? So I totally get where you're coming from when those folks out there ask for a more full-throated endorsement, but I also 100% trust these writers to understand the responsibility that they have. And I really feel, I mean, like, there were things that they talked about getting persecuted for that I could identify with. Even to your point, Cam, as a cis white dude, it was like, man, everybody has had a moment in their life where somebody unfairly judged them. And this episode does such a good job of capturing the way that feels and the injustice of it. And I'm like, I have said it online before, and I will say it again right here. This is an all-timer episode for me personally.
I like the allegorical use they do. It was someone in our Discord, I can't really take credit for it, but they had said, like, when they were watching it, they were like, oh, okay, this is an allegory for homosexuality. And then a few minutes later, it was like, oh, no, this is religious persecution. Then it was something else. And I like that. I like that it can kind of span these things and you can't really pin it down. It's not so simple. I mean, this is an amount of ambiguity I like in this episode. And I think you were saying, Jesse, I feel that gets through to the people who need to hear that message more easily than if you hit the nail on the head.
Right. And I think it was Venus in our Discord who brought up that the actual kind of discrimination isn't necessarily what they're pointing at. They're pointing at the source of it all, which is fear and not being sure, right? It all comes from a place of prejudice and fear, and it doesn't matter what kind it is, it all stems from that same thing. And it felt like, you know, the writers were really trying to get at that, and I think they succeeded. This episode, I mean, we've talked before about how Strange New Worlds can get heavy, but I've spent probably the last 15 or 20 minutes of this episode like trying to watch through tears, because I was just like, this is so human. Like, wow.
And like with Jesse's point about, oh, people wanting to be more full-throated, maybe more specific, it's like a specific episode would be an unwatchable episode 10 or 20 or 30 years from now of Star Trek. I mean, Star Trek, that's what they do. They do allegory, and they do non-specific or just close enough to both your points. Like, yeah, this needs to be heard by people who need to hear it, and they're not going to watch it if we're really specific. And we live in really specific days these days. But this episode will keep working on and on and on.
Well, what's the Riker non-binary episode? Because that was written as a homosexual story 30 years ago, but now it can be about something else, and it is because of allegory.
Yeah, I think just the aspect of what I like about sci-fi in this world, in different genres, you know, comics, all that kind of stuff, is you can bring in the message, you know, similar to what Jesse said, what John said. It could be very subtle. You know, it is not necessarily going to hit you right off, but you're starting to think about it, right? Like, they're starting this conversation where it's like, you can see your personal stories, you know, Mariah calling in was just a touching call, you know, where you start to think a little bit about what your experience is going through. And, you know, and I can't even imagine, you know, what Mariah's going through, but I know as a Black woman, or in the Black community, a lot of the times you're thinking about the fact of, you know, or just if you're in a marginalized community as a whole, the important aspect of what I think Mariah's thing she wanted to draw attention to was the fact of there's some people that feel like if you're out loud about it in a certain way, or you're still pushing against everything, you're making more noise than somebody that's, you know, as Una wanted to be before, you know, where she was just like, okay, if I do this job, if I stay the line, they won't figure out who I am exactly, but maybe I can make headway that way. And there's always that tug and pull. It's a double-edged sword. It's that tug and pull of like, you know, are you going to go straight on with your activism? Like, how do you want to make your message? Like, how do you think people are going to take your message? You know, what do you stand for? How are you going to fight? And Mira and Una both have valid points. They're both fighting for the same thing. You know, they deserve, as Illyrians, to have the same opportunity. You know, however you take that in the world, in the real life aspect, you know, whether it's prejudice, whether it's being sexist, everybody, you know, at the bottom line needs to have the same opportunities. But how are you going to go about that? You know, what feels safe for you? What feels secure for you? What gets a message across? You know, and I think that's what's so powerful about this episode. I remember there was a caller earlier. I spent like 15, 20 minutes like sitting here thinking like, you know, man, she pointed out a lot of things, you know, that I deal with on a daily basis. I'm sure we all deal with on a daily basis. You know, there's so much going on in this world. And how do I make people see my pain, my story, without it looking like I'm just trying to cram something down their throat? You know what I mean? So I think this was such a cool episode and such a fun way to, you know, to use, like, if you're in the Trek world, if you're not in the Trek world, you know, if you're just drawn in by the costumes, by the characters, you learn something. Like, some line stuck with you and you were like, well, why can't this Illyrian do this? Or, you know, you seeing that poor little girl sitting there with her leg broken and she can't go anywhere. You know, something about that is going to stick in your mind that you're going to remember and start questioning and start talking to somebody. So I think this is like, you know, I just want to say before I forget at the end, and I think this is such a cool platform that you guys have created that people can call in and leave these type of messages. It's so powerful.
Thank you.
The callers really have been, I don't mean to speak for John and Cam, but they really have been our favorite part of this show. Because, you know, as we started it, we were like, well, how do we get people to listen? And then we realized, oh, we put their voices on. People want to hear their voices as part of the conversation. But we did not expect to get 15, 16, 20 calls a week, you guys. I am so happy to even be part of the community, and, you know, to receive thanks for helping build it is like, we honestly don't feel like we did much other than go, hey, come talk to us. And thank you all again so much. And thank you, Ryan, for saying that, because it really does. It means a lot to us.
Well, we're welcoming back Newman to the Open Pike Night Stage.
Hey, Open Pike Night. It's Newman from the Movies for Days podcast. This was like a Drumhead 2.0. That's not a criticism. This is a great Star Trek trial episode, but it goes deeper. It personalizes the stakes, and it rings so true, so relevant to things we're still struggling with in today's social paradigm. It was so satisfying the way this episode focused on these strong women all working together to hit this problem from different angles. Those angles reflecting their character and their relation to the narrative. Nira Khatul has completely leapfrogged over queen status. She is in goddess status already. Everything about her. Performance, writing, costume, hair. Oh my effing G. And Una's big speech at the end about why she wanted to join Starfleet. That it's all of these different people from different worlds coming together, working together to accomplish things that could never be done. And what an inspiration that is. And it's like, oh, my feels. That's why we love Star Trek. That's why I love Star Trek. I selfishly want an Ortegas episode. We haven't really gotten one yet. Okay, I salute you, Open Pike Night, to the stars through hardship.
All right, thank you very much, Newman. Let's talk about Nira and what we're thinking why she took the trial in the first place and where she ended up.
This is the criticism I'm most open to changing my mind on, guys. So help me out here. Again, one of the questions was where's Nira coming from? Is she here for herself? Is she here for Una? That's a question in the first half, and I don't know about the end, primarily because of the April scene, right? So she does the big April scene, and everyone's criticizing her for it, and it feels like, you're kind of throwing Una under the bus to make a statement here with that scene. And then at the end, I feel like either the April scene needed to be integral to getting Una off, and she mentions like how he breaks the Prime Directive. I didn't feel like it was an integral part of getting Una off. It felt like a throwaway line. Or I feel like Nira had to have a moment, an arc where she goes, you know what, I am betraying my friend here. I need to make a change. And it just felt a little muddy, that April scene, like what it was supposed to represent. So help me out here, Jesse.
So I think that the April scene is twofold, right? The first part of it, as you said, it does appear that she's kind of throwing Una under the bus here. So I'll say it's a dramatic technique for adding tension, right? Because it's a way to further obscure what Nira's motivations are. Is she just here for the case? Is she here for all Illyrians? Or is it like a law thing, which we find out it is? But the specific cross-examination of April is her establishing precedent for Starfleet going, you guys make exceptions all the time. I'm not saying that you shouldn't. I'm saying you do. So I'm going to remind you of that, and then I'm going to present an exception for you to make. So it's actually part of the legal strategy, because she doesn't ask them to change the law and say, now Illyrians should be allowed in Starfleet. What she asks for is that you give this one person asylum because she so clearly asked for it, and she only asked for it because she believed you would give it to her. I think that the scene with
I think I just
April,
wanted that sharper. If Vulcan had been like, this doesn't work because of precedent, and she could have gone, precedent, I'm glad you brought that up. Remember.
I think she did, though, because she goes, you guys have shown time and again that you will flaunt the rules if it suits your purposes. So I'm not disagreeing. Like,
right. I wish it
definitely
felt
a choice,
more necessary. It felt like the cherry on the top, as opposed to like, no, this was an integral piece of the puzzle that I had a plan from the beginning.
Well, and I think now that I will say, I think she did have a plan from the beginning. I don't know if she knew every step of that plan, but she knew like the picture to paint.
She was laying the groundwork. Yeah.
Right. But I think that the scene where April goes in to talk to Pike and says, I really wish I had more of a chance to talk about how highly I think of her, is meant to be the punctuation of that, because it's like, dude, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter how highly any one of us individually thinks of her. That's not what's on trial. What's on trial is the system, and that's what Nira is going to indict. And they actually said, you're not supposed to indict April. And she's like, dude, I'm doing my job. Like,
I don't know. For me, it just felt like she had been trying to fight these cases as an Illyrian, knowing that she was up against this brick wall. And I feel like she started out as like, okay, this is my moment to shine. If I get this through, I'll get, all these other people that's been counting on me, that think, that's been waiting on me to win their trials or whatever, because Pike points out, she's been trying to win these other cases and they're not getting shine. They're not getting light. So she's like, okay, if I could just do this one thing, maybe it'll help me. But then I think it turns into her where she's like, oh, now this is interesting. Because Una has really kind of worked the system in her own way. And I was kind of just thinking she was over here like just chilling, living the high life. But she's been working the system too. So I think she kind of changed her tone a little bit where she was like, okay, I get it now. Because now we can work together. Mira and Una know, whether they want, I don't know what past they have. Like, you kind of get it unraveled a little bit, between the both of them. But they can read each other very well. So she's able to be in the courtroom like, okay, now I understand where you're coming from. Let me play this to help you win, to help you get you out of this, because I understand. But yeah, I think she was always on the aspect of like, I've been fighting this for so long, and this is where you've been. So I have to make some kind of statement here. And I don't know, I guess it could be an argument of like, okay, she had this plan. Maybe she is still working for her benefit and we haven't quite figured it out. She said before, I don't really like Starfleet, but this is a step. I don't really like you guys. Like, she makes that clear. Don't really like it, but this is a step.
I'm glad you brought that up, Ryan, because I was kind of feeling the same way. It felt like, she had been thinking for so long and harboring so much anger or something, feelings against the Federation and Starfleet for so long, that the cross-examination of April was sort of that initial overreactive outburst of like, crap, I have my chance to actually do something here in front of the audience I wanted to, and just like swinging too hard, too far for the first outing, and then realizing like, okay, no, I'm an attorney. I like this. We do have something that can work here. And man, I do like Jesse's point though too of like, it could be just laying the groundwork, but I felt like it was more just like, I'm going to put the system on trial, and like, oh wait, no, I'm going to work the system.
I think it was definitely both, because she's a person, right? Like, she's going to have personal motivations. Like, and you see Nira's arc specifically go from, I have no faith in Una and no faith in Starfleet, to, okay, I have faith in Una. Maybe I can use that to extend my faith a little further out. Maybe there are some people in this organization actually trying to do the right thing. So let's see where that goes. And to your point, she totally recalibrates, right? She goes from like pure attack to like, okay, let's go nuance and a little more subtle than that. But I think that just is part of her personal character arc.
Mm-hmm. And I am going to say I'm 100% with Cam. There is a scene missing. There was at least a line missing where that is stated a little bit more clearly to the audience. This is a great episode. This is not a perfect episode.
It's an episode about nuance.
I mean, that's true. It's hard to argue with that. But yeah, I love what Ryan said about Nira seeing Una as like, oh, you're hiding, and then kind of going, oh no, you are gaming the system. You are kind of, our goals are the same. You're just going at it from a different direction than I would. Which I feel you definitely do see at the end. But yeah, I agree with John that maybe just a little hint in the middle somewhere to see that switch.
The system, just whenever anybody talks about the system, there are 3 legs to the stool of the system to change it. And it is from the inside, from the outside, or just hide within it. Like, you know, those are the 3 ways you deal with any system you live in. And this episode gives us all 3 of those blatantly on screen, and it's a fantastic example. I'd like, again, going back to the you know, not being super specific. It's like, hey, if you want to approach change in any big system, this episode gives you all 3 options of how to potentially model that. Speaking of changing the system, there was a fighter pilot who was stricken with night blindness after a carrier landing, who worked for within the system. And let's hear from a caller about that.
Hey, Open Pike Night. Hope you enjoyed this latest episode of Star Trek Jag. Just a shout out to Cameron and John from Green Shirt. But wow, this episode was peak Star Trek, and I adore it. My favorite Trek is when it delves into our humanity through character-driven drama and holds a mirror up to our own world's social failings to show us how we can do better. Of course, I thought of TNG's Measure of a Man and Drumhead, and even the Menagerie and Court Martial from TOS. But honestly, this episode stands on its own and does a great job of effectively using allegory to speak to our times. The writing, directing, and acting was all on point, and this has become one of my favorite Trek episodes of all time. I think it's also a great way to introduce fans who have never seen Star Trek to the franchise. It also excites me that we're seeing more women involved in the creative end of Trek behind the camera as well as in front of it. The episode was written and directed by women, and all the main female characters shined, especially Una and Nira, but everyone had a role to play, and honestly, I wasn't watching it thinking, oh wow, look at all these women who passed the Bechdel test. I was drawn into the story and the performances. As for my Crusher connection, I think it's safe to say Dr. Beverly Crusher would side with the Illyrians. She's had her own issues with Starfleet's rules and regulations, and maybe one of her ancestors was one of the doctors that helped Una. Instant Trek classic, 10 out of 10. Sets the bar high for the rest of the season. Until next week, live long and prosper.
All right, Michelle, thank
Michelle's
you very much.
Desperate to get all of her thoughts out in 90 seconds. Well done, Michelle. You did it.
Good work.
Crushed it.
I would like to talk more, and I know Cam would like to talk more about the history and a little bit of bad blood between Una and Nira, and how we felt that played and how effective we thought that was.
Yeah, I feel like this was one of the biggest burning questions. Like in one of the first, I mean, this was a question set up last episode, right? Like, oh, she's got this childhood friend, someone from the past. What is their bad blood? I guess it turned out that it was that Una moved with her parents to another city when she was a kid.
Well, and nobody defended Nira's brother or Nira's cousin or whatever when he was being persecuted. Like they didn't say anything. I think was part of what Nira was mad at her for.
I didn't get that at what?
Because there was some fight
was
at
that
school.
Her cousin?
Right? Like,
was that Nira's cousin?
Or maybe it was her brother? I don't 100% remember, but I feel like there was a family thing right there. And there was like a fight at school, and she said, did anybody stand up for that boy? And she was like, no. And she's like, and then what happened? She goes, and then their family got taken away.
Oh, I didn't get the impression that was Nira's related to Nira at all. So the moment is, right, Nira does her questioning, and then she walks away, and then Una pipes up with some more information, and it's that they split the city into 2, the Illyrians, the non-Illyrians, and her family moved to the non-Illyrians because they could cover.
Right.
And so that
Nira's
felt like
family...
that was Una's confession, and then she said, I felt bad, and so that was her apology. And then at the end, Nira says, I didn't know everything you'd say. And I'm like, what?
Right.
What information came out? Like, this seems
she didn't think
very
she would get an
Babysitter
apology.
Club drama here. Like, oh, my BFF moved to the next city with her parents. I understand there's some like
she moved
nuance,
into the racially divided city on the side that we couldn't move into
as a child.
Right.
Yeah.
And who holds like illogical grudges more strongly than a child or me, right? Like, so it's like as a person
Jesse
who
would
knows where
relate with
she's
this.
coming from.
Yeah.
I think it was specifically Nira being upset with her that her family chose to go to the non-Illyrian city because she's like, you're hiding who you are and you've no pride. Like what is going on here? But again, to your point, she was a kid and that's totally fair. I think that it is meant to be there was a childhood issue and that's why it's hard for her to get over. And I think the information she didn't know she would get was an apology from Una.
To Jesse's point, I do think it was about, Nira saying, look, I'm going to stay here and fight in a sense, right? Like she was like, I didn't leave, even though they're kids, right? You can all chalk it up to being kids. But I think as you climb the ranks, because Nira's doing her own thing, Una's doing her own thing, and they're kind of climbing the ranks on their different sides. And I feel like at some point they came to a meet and Nira was like, so this is what you're going to do, right? Like you're going to join, Enterprise, Starfleet. Are you going to mix it up a little bit? Like, what are you going to do? Like, what's going to be your contribution? Because you're Illyrian, right? And, Una's like, well, I'm just going to play this line and see what happens. I feel like, those conversations that we don't get to see, right? Like, we're just thinking about, there are these two kids, their parents took them away. Her parents decided, okay, we're just going to move away. We're not going to be faced with this. We're going to go away. Nira's still there. She's still in the fight there. So she's like, so for some reason she has this grudge of like, where were you when I was fighting over here? Like, I need to hold this against you. Like, even though they're both Illyrians, there's this both they're having to deal with. She's like, well, what were you doing? For some, like that's something that she couldn't get out, starting this episode over. But yeah, I mean, I just think it's one of those things where, like you said, it was like a nuance that they played so well that happens in our everyday lives. People don't respect, certain ways that people decide to deal with, whatever they're, whether it's prejudice, whether it's sexist, whether it's, your sexuality, whatever you're dealing with, people handle it. People draw attention to it the way they need to do it. And, you're always going to have those differences about, well, I don't exactly agree with how you did that, or you should have did more on this end. And, they put this in Star Trek, it's a TV episode about Star Trek. And I still can't get over like how, insane and brilliant that is at the same time that they put something so massive in this episode like this.
Space grudges.
Yeah, space grudges.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like grudges, it is older Trek did not have long-term grudges. Like this is something new that they're actually acknowledging, hey, these, emotions are still emotions. It doesn't matter how many hundreds of years in the future this is. People are still going to have feelings that last a long time and aren't just going to get over everything by the next episode, be it a barrel breaking your spine or somebody snubbing you. It's like, yeah, hey, things take time to heal and take actions to change. And
unless you get assimilated. That's a next episode thing, then you're fine.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. It's just easy fix. No problem.
That doesn't happen next episode if people thought that was just saying.
But I do like the point we talked about with dealing with children, because our next caller has some thoughts about that too. And I'd like to welcome Layla for the first time to the Open Pike Night Stage.
Hi, my name is Leela, first-time caller, and this episode fell short for me. No one seemed to give any kind of good reason for Federation policy on genetic engineering other than because it's the rules and because they might turn into evil dictators. But framing it as a racism allegory or a marginalized people allegory also falls flat. Because Nira argues the Federation should accept genetically engineered people for who we are, when the whole issue is that their parents did not accept them for who they are. Yes, it's wrong to discriminate against people for what was done to them as children, but the fact that it was done to them as children is exactly what makes it ethically problematic, and that went completely unaddressed. Especially in contrast to episodes like the Masterpiece Society and Dr. Bashir, I presume, which did delve into those issues. I had a couple of other quibbles. First, it was weird that people kept calling her Una at the trial. This is a formal hearing. That's Commander Chin Riley to you. Second, I wish they Mira and Una's history explicitly romantic. They leaned so hard on queer allegory of Illyrians having to live in the closet, and hinted so hard that Una and Nira used to be friends. Come on, friends? It felt like queer baiting. However, Nira is a great character, and I'd love to see more of her. Thanks for listening.
All right, Leela, thank you very much for calling into Open Pike Night, and welcome to the growing Open Pike Night crew. Yeah, I really like her point that they did not address, like, yeah, this happened before she was born.
They do say, you know, Una didn't have a choice. She didn't ask to be genetically modified. It was done before she was born. And then she throws in, as is our culture, right? Like,
yeah, they don't
that to me is the
why
connecting
they do it
line.
beyond that.
Right. And that's totally true. But to me, that's the connecting line to all the other examples in Trek, right? Because, like, well, why do you have a law that if you step on the grass at the wrong time of the day, you get killed? Well, that's our culture. Like, okay, that's the answer, right? And I think as far as like their whole, well, they might turn into evil dictators. I think that's meant to illustrate that this is a prejudice that is not necessarily based in any truth. There was an example of a thing, and they're using that negative example to judge the rest of the people on it, which again is wrong, and that's what Nira is fighting for. But I can't disagree on wanting more Nira and Commander Chin Riley. That dynamic was very well played, and I almost feel like the actors added more subtext than may have been there in the script. I don't know. I haven't seen the script. But I definitely am ready for more Nira, and I would love to see her have to fight against the Enterprise crew because they would not stand a chance.
Yeah, there's definitely something about the parents not accepting their kids that I bumped on, but you put it in words, Layla, that I hadn't yet. I just was like, something weird, but it's not really the point of the episode. So to Jesse's point, like, it is just like, that's their culture. That's all you really need for this episode.
I would be curious to know more about the parents. Like, do they probably have time for that? Probably not. Like, did they have time to really kind of dive into, like, why they were doing that? They probably were just like, okay, let's just go ahead and state this and get it out of the way. But, you know, what I think, you know, for some, like, when it comes to, like, my, you know, being in minority or diversity culture, sometimes parents, you know, give you certain things to protect yourself, right? Like, they know what you're going to face, so they give you certain things to protect yourself. Now, they don't genetically modify you, right? Like, you know, it's probably, you know, illegal. But, you know, like, if you're talking about in the sci-fi world, you know, being in that fantasy world, I feel like it's a certain way to kind of show that, right? Like, they're trying to give these kids a way to kind of, you know, they thought at the time was protecting them, giving them defense for what they knew they were going to come up against. You know, you could argue whether it's right or wrong, you know, but it's like they were doing. Parent,
if I could give my kid the ability not to break a leg from falling off the slide or dying from a bee sting, yeah.
Right.
I don't care what laws there are. I'm doing it. Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, you could argue it either way. Like, is it right? No. You know, would you rather see like a whole fight? Like, no, you respect my kid for who they are. Yeah. But is that sometimes it's like, I'm just going to protect my kid and get them through this so they don't get hurt. You know, so you could argue that either way. But yeah, I would love to see, we got to say Commander Chin Riley right now. We got to make sure we're saying that. So yeah, I would love to see like her have to get pulled. Like, I would love Nira to call her and be like, you remember that favor I did for you? I need a little help. I need you to come, you know, check this out for me. I would love to see that episode where she's like, I need you to pay this forward. I need a little help on this side and kind of see where that goes. That would be interesting.
Let's get Starfleet behind my cause.
Yeah. That would be interesting. I would love that episode. Yeah. That would be cool. Yeah, I would love that.
Season 3 plot line here. I love it. Love it.
Either that or the next time when the crew finally arrests Captain Angel, she's like, oh, call my attorney. And it's Nira.
Yep.
That would be cool.
Would be super. Yep. I liked all of Layla's points. I really do like hey, this is weird to be calling her by her first name during a trial. They'd be like, oh yeah, so Chris did this, and Chris did that. It's like, that's Captain Pike to you. Like,
right. Yeah. You should have called April Bobby the entire episode. I'd have been here for
They call you Bobby? No. All right, Bobby.
As the Layla's point about the kind of like, the eugenics war justifying all of this. I mean, I kind of said last year with the Illyrians, I feel like Star Trek has kind of been telling, not showing, and I've got a little bit more to say about the eugenics war on that next episode, and I'll just leave it at that.
All right. Well, let's go on to our next caller and hear what our celebrity guest has to say.
Attention, Open Pike Night. This is Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Starship Enterprise.
Ooh.
Previously redacted recordings have been released to us in the 24th century regarding the trial of Commander Una Chin Riley and her status as an Illyrian. While profound, it is my judgment that these proceedings are more prevalent to those living in the 21st century. Perhaps the words of Counselor Nira can broaden the horizons of those of a narrower mind. Furthermore, while certain more masculine energies are naturally frowned upon these days, it is pleasing to see what one can accomplish with a stubborn man in your corner. Also glad to see Captains Pike and Patel get to keep their casual relationship proceeding. You know, I too once had a casual fling with a colleague, but she was quite aghast when I did not, as they say, kiss and tell about her to my bridge crew. Still baffled by that one. But got out.
All right, that was Captain Picard, as brought to us by Sincera, who we will not be able to get to his other call today, but we will on our patron bonus for this episode. And he is starting a new podcast called Another Fracking Podcast, where he is watching Firefly with some friends. So,
well,
Battlestar
Galactica.
I'm sorry. Wow, I was looking at Jesse when I said
me.
that. Where he's, I was just staring at Jesse and talking about his podcast, where he is watching Battlestar Galactica with some friends, one of whom has never seen it before. So, yeah, Pike and Patel, they got a lot of time in this trial episode. I really enjoyed the fact that it wasn't just grudge, and just, where I'm mad at you because you're, prosecuting my first officer. It's like, oh, hey, adult conversations about conflict. Look at this. What a strange thing to see on TV.
And she still is genuinely trying to help him. She's like, look, if you go on the stand, here's what I'll say. I will eat you alive on the stand. You cannot go. Why would you do that? You know how good I am. And he just accepts that. And it to Steve's point, there is some value in a stubborn guy if he knows where to, stand and be the pillar. Like I was saying earlier, he doesn't show any, fear or anything. He just shows some frustration when his crew is looking at him, and he just gets up and walks out of the room to go deal with his business. And this, I really feel, Captain Picard, that you could take some lessons from Captain Pike. It's okay to show emotion. It really is. In fact, sometimes it will make your crew work harder for you on your behalf. So maybe give that a shot, Captain Picard.
Or even when the rest of the crew isn't around, and it's just the last scene of the episode, and you walk up to your first commander who just avoided 20 years jail time and have no words but to just hug her with a full emotional hug. That's just such a great moment, right?
Yeah.
It was someone else in our Discord was talking about how that is truly non-toxic masculinity right on display right there.
And his eyes are so full of tears when he hugs her. We have talked about the subtlety of Anson Mount's facial acting, but this episode might be the peak of that for me, because it's 2 seconds that you see him behind Una, and it's so good.
I feel like that scene is just, that is Strange New Worlds in a moment, right? I feel that is this is the only series that scene happens in that well.
Yeah, I love that. That hug was such a cool, such a great ending, a wrap to all the moments. Because you're not expecting it. You're sitting there, you're like, it's going to say something? What are they going to do? You get that, awkward 5 or 10 seconds where they got to just looking at each other. And so, yeah, it was such a great, cute moment where you could tell they're just such a family and a team, and that there's always somebody that's got your back, even though you might be the weirdest person on the crew, they got your back, right? Because everybody has become this cool instrument where everybody's got their little part that they're playing, and you can't move without one of the pieces, which is so cool to have that in there. But, was this a unconscious, or conscious uncoupling? How they like to put it these days between, Captain Pike and Patel. Are they, so I guess are they no, well, I don't know if they were really a couple, but when he wasn't on the Enterprise, they had something going on. So is it now, is he you try to get rid of my number one, so I gotta ghost you now, it's over?
I honestly hope they stick together, because watching a couple stick together through difficult times, that's just good TV, right? Every TV show with a strong couple knows that. And I think
sticking together is what good waffles do. Yeah.
And not to keep going back to this word, but like the nuance of having a power couple in Star Trek who isn't absolutely perfect, right? We've seen Pike now be less than perfect. We've seen Battelle not be perfect, but they are perfect for each other. And, you know, they're going to push through all of this difficulty of being separate captains and having different jobs and all that stuff. Like, they're committed to each other in a very similar way to how Pike is committed to his crew. To me, that indicates that he thinks of Battelle as family.
Well, and I've wondered, having written the second season before season 1 aired, how much the writers were going to get right about what fans wanted more of. And boy, am I glad that they felt the same way we did about Battelle. I mean, I feel like most of us wanted more Battelle after season 1, and it seems like the writers are giving that to us in season 2. I'm glad they kept her around.
And like Jesse, you said, the nuance of a power couple, just having a power couple in Star Trek is, after like Miles and Keiko and now Pike and Battelle, it's like, there's not a whole long list there of
Stamets and Culber, but
yeah, thank you, Stamets and Culber. It's like, but actually having people who are in charge, having long-term romantic relationships, as both at the same level, I really like seeing it. I am really curious if he's going to tell her what he knows.
Right.
Because his first officer knows. His second officer knows. She still doesn't know that he has foreknowledge. And that's gonna, I have a feeling if they do continue on this relationship, that will be a big deal when it finally comes to light for her.
Interestingly, she also doesn't know if he has foreskin. Another subplot to pursue.
That I had thought of, obviously.
All right. Well, with that, let's get on to our next caller. Let's welcome Angie to the Open Pike Night Stage.
Hi, Open Pike Night. This is Angie. I really enjoyed the performances in this episode. Yetide Badaki's portrayal of Nira was outstanding. Nira had such a piercing intensity, but also displayed empathy with La'an and Una. I really hope we see Nira again. I also loved Mbenga and Ortegas' meta-discussion on body language that led into so many expressive moments in the episode from the whole cast. Seeing the crew silently watching the proceedings and their range of emotions, the council squirming in their seats when Nira was reminding them of their not very inclusive history, Captain Battelle trying to hide her glee as she realized where Nira was headed with her closing argument. There were so many wonderful moments with the performances and the writing in this episode. I also have to mention the exquisite Illyrian costumes, the TOS callback dress uniforms and badges of this episode. Thoughts on whether Dr. Aaron McDonald's one-word teaser of colorful could refer to these amazing costumes? I look forward to hearing your discussion on this episode. Live long and prosper.
All right. Thank you, Angie. Welcome to the Open Pike Night Stage. So that's the first. I hadn't thought about Dr. Aaron's one-word tease. And I don't know. I'd say we could put this up there as a contender for it.
I feel there's an episode coming up that might be more of a contender, but still not a for sure.
That's where I'm at. Yeah. And actually, to Angie's point, we missed one, you guys, because we were given Orion cocktails, and the bartenders in the first episode, The Broken Circle, are Orion. And that, I believe, is where Pelia ordered her drink from. So I don't know if maybe there used to be more at the Orion bar, and that's why we got that, or if that was just a ultra subtle hint, which, to be fair, is what we asked for.
We said we didn't want anything big. So.
But I hadn't even thought of that, Angie. And the one thing that I had thought of was I want Bernadette Croft to dress me, because these people are just all gorgeous, and the work on the costumes, the Mass Effect epaulets, like I loved everything visually about this. And to go back a few calls, I know somebody had mentioned the computer reading out that cartridge. Pike actually hands one of those cartridges directly to Nira in their first scene together. And I was like, I love this, because you don't need to know, right? Like, you get it. He's handing her a file. That's what files look like now. And it's those like subtle world building things like that and the detail on all of Nira's costumes, which I'm going to say she wore like 5 or 6 in this episode.
Guys, how did we get this far into the conversation and just now talking about Nira's costumes?
I'm going to say that I appreciated those on the level of like a Queen Amidala kind of costume, right? Like they were all unique. They were all beautiful, just absolutely gorgeous.
So my wife was walking in and out of the room for like the first third of the episode and kind of watching bits and pieces. And the story did suck her in. And she was like, okay, I have to finish this. And she sat down and finished the episode. But all she would talk about was Nira's costumes. Every scene was like, is she in a different costume? It's amazing. That one's amazing. Yeah. She said she wanted to go as her for Halloween. And then she was like, no, I just want to go as her for Tuesday.
Yeah, seriously. Like to compete with the very well cut Starfleet uniforms with just outfits is like, wow. Like, and there's a little bit of the mirroring of the design of some Starfleet outfits. There, a lot of her shirts are, or a lot of her outfits are asymmetrical. She'll have like a design that's only on the sleeve of the garment and, you know, high collared at different heights and stuff. I mean, when she walks into the rooms, you believe that she is a lawyer who does not have time for bullshit.
Yeah, it was so powerful. I mean, I love the hair as well. Like everything just worked. Like the lighting, you know, because sometimes that could be when you have characters of color, they don't do that right. Everything just worked where it just popped. And I remember when she first came on camera, or just seeing like, you know, we get a lot of, you know, like the press shots and the clip-its and stuff like that. And it just draws you in. You like, who is this woman? Like, I want to know, like, she's changed, you know, just something about her just changes the game. And it's like, she's making an impression and you like, everything just works together. Like you love when everybody pays attention to all the details. So it works together. So you get exactly what, you know, her purpose, her presence is supposed to leave you with. So yeah, just a phenomenal. I love the Nira character. I hope it is not the last time we see her. I hope she keeps continuing to come back. And yeah, I love where there could be like, you know, the way it was built, you know, the symmetry of it. It could be a stripe over here, the way it was structured, where it was very like rigid, you know, it just gave her like, don't touch me today. I'm reading my books. I don't want to talk about it. Just get to the point, what you need, you know, what you need to get done.
The bar here. Oh, legal pun. The bar here was really high, right? Like you're stepping into a like half-century franchise that has well established itself as far as legal episodes go, and you're stepping onto a stage that has some seriously heavy-hitting actors, and she's all we can talk about. I mean, she's Emmy. Just give the woman the Emmy, please.
Yeah, I won't be surprised if Strange New Worlds starts getting, you know, more and more attention as it deserves to. Like, we'll have conventions in the future where people are fully all dressed out in cosplay to reenact the courtroom scenes, just on con floors, and like you get to go sit in the, you get to go sit in the audience and watch, be the jury, however you want it to go. But yeah, the costumes. I mean, Bernadette Croft. Just amazing. Let's
do an episode where we litigate a Star Trek episode. And we could like, assign prosecution and stuff.
I don't know. Which one would we choose? There's so many. Yeah.
I mean, that's for later.
Yeah. Well, while we decide, let's hear from another caller. Here is Matt returning to the Open Pike Night Stage.
This is Palladium 3, co-host of Slime Time series of podcasts. First off, high level, this episode was amazing. Honestly, this has been my favorite Trek episode in at least the past 20 years. No lie, loved it. Now, to help organize my thoughts a little bit today and going forward the rest of the season, I'm going to try to touch on just 3 points each week. I'm going to call on my hits, shits, and misses. Let's see how this goes. Hits this week was the acting. Holy cow, did that lawyer act the hell out of every scene she was in. And I was super impressed by the entire cast. You know, they didn't have a lot to do or a lot of lines this time, but all those dozens of close-ups of them watching the proceedings were striking to me. We've seen Anson's face say a ton before, and I think they can all do that too. My shits this week, oh, that bald bastard Vulcan. What a little shit he was. But I swear he was almost smiling there near the end, wasn't he? I saw that. I mean, if the scene in the cafeteria with Spock was an outburst, well, then he was damn near hooting and hollering with his quarter smile at the end when the lawyer had that victory. Now, Mrs., I didn't find anything wrong this week, so I'll just talk about Mrs. Pike and point out I am so glad she tried to help her Boytorian crew by her pointed questions. She asked questions in the courtroom that people could actually answer without lying. thing. They didn't have to directly say they knew Una was an Illyrian. All right, Season 2, Episode 2 gets my nod over Season 1, Episode 2. And, wasn't in there very long, but we got that Illyrian world. So, Strange New Worlds count this season? 2.
All right, Bloody
2 for
M3,
2.
thanks for keeping count of the Strange New Worlds for the season. That's a great call. Yeah, let's talk about the rest of the crew because, man, we got to watch them watching TV for a lot of this episode.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't get, like you said, didn't get to say much, but man, they were acting their asses off, sitting there staring at a blue screen.
Well, the editor knew who to cut to during what line of the inspirational speeches. Those all worked for me.
And as a huge Ortegas fan, I love the times that they gave her, kind of looking sideways, what does that mean? Is that bad or good? Because she's a pilot, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's not a legal expert. So she's but she's also not an idiot. So she's following these things and she doesn't outright go, what does that mean? She just kind of looks around and goes, she's gauging other reactions. She's reading a room, right? And I gotta say, Matt, thank you for calling in from the local Sylvan Glade with the wonderful, Disney chirping birds in the background. I'm sure they follow you everywhere. I do think that the truest Star Trek, right, is always an ensemble, right? It's always, how do these actors work together? There's a little bit of, the star of the show in certain series, but it's always about the relationships. And I feel like this episode has really exemplified that. And it's just, I agree with everything that you said, Matt. I'll just leave it at that.
I like seeing them all in a group. We got to see it in the last episode too. This isn't a party. This isn't a celebration. This isn't, this is more hanging out that we've seen by a bigger amount of the crew than we get to see in almost any other Star Trek. DS9 does it a decent amount, and I would say they're probably some of the closest, but just sitting around talking, it really feels like this is something they do a lot. And we're 12 episodes into this entire series. And just the ideas you get about this crew this quickly into a series is amazing, and part of what makes Strange New Worlds so stand out from other Star Trek series.
Well, and I feel like it would be a criticism on any other series to go, why are they showing us watch them watch TV?
Yeah.
I don't need to see them watch the mission from last episode. I don't need that. I get it. I guess actually this is probably a good point to bring up my only criticism of this entire episode.
Ooh.
Which is when Neera finally starts breaking down her closing argument, she goes, Una did this, and Una did this. I didn't need the flashback to those three things because it was in this episode. But I get it. That's a legal TV trope, right? You got to remind the people of the moment that happened because they didn't register it as what Neera is saying it is. So I get it, but that's the one point where I was going, hey, we get it. We're smart enough to watch this without a flashback scene. But does that really alter my enjoyment of the episode? No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
I think if you didn't have this set of actors, how talented they are, I think you could have done without this whole thing. But it's the fact that these actors, and the way they, work the camera around them with the close-ups, the way they work it just makes it, to me, so intriguing to be able to watch them like they're watching a Judge Judy or a divorce court, right? They're all into it. And I want to know because their faces are Celia, playing Naoda, she was like, wait, did you see that? She was looking at the screen and she was looking back to kind of see what their reactions were. She was like, did you hear that? What about this? It's like you could see it all on her face without her saying anything. And then, Pike, that was, I think it might be Jesse who brought that. It was one of my favorite moments where he was just when they started going after, the way Neera was taking her questioning. And you're like, well, whose side are you on right now? Because she was going off with the questioning. And he got up here we go. I was like, it's like he was saying she had one job. She had one job and he just got up. He got up and walked down. He was like, what am I going to do now? What is happening? That's the part where you get up in the movie and you're like, really? I got to take 5. Really? What am I watching right now? So I just thought that was so great to just see their, I was just eating it up. But yeah, there are probably parts where they could have just stayed in the courtroom and just really kept us because the lines were flowing and it was so much drama. But it was just this cast. I just love it. I love when they can just. It's amazing. As actors, like you got something when they can use their face and they don't have to talk a lot. And I think they have that mastered. I feel like if it was any other thing, we'd be like, why are you showing us this? We don't care. Like, keep us in the courtroom. Like, we don't care what they're thinking right now. Like, we want to know what's going on with Una and what they think, what's going on in the courtroom.
Now, I gotta say, this is probably the only audience that this joke will work for. But your comment about the scene in the movie that makes you throw your hands up and leave, were you watching Illyrian and the City of a Thousand Planets? Oh, that's as good as we get here. I'm sorry.
No, Jesse, nobody watched that.
Oh, man.
All right. Let's take another call. Let's hear from Abby.
Hey, Open Pike. It's Abby Summer from the First Flight podcast. Okay, first, my little costume lover squeal over here. Could I just go play in Nira's closet because the woman is impeccable, down to the manicures, the jewelry, everything. The tailoring on her outfits were incredible, and those new dress uniforms that we saw in court are possibly my favorite uniform of all time now, especially now that I see them in action. They're just glorious and personal. Now, I have to say I've watched this episode 3 times already in less than 24 hours, and I just can't get over how well done, how well crafted it is. And I love that it goes back to the classic Trek theme of you can do what is arguably the right thing over and over and over, and it still doesn't come out to good results, or it may not always be the right thing. And all of that speaking truth to power for marginalized groups was really moving to me. And I love that there are so many different groups that can relate and find power and meaning in this episode. And if you haven't yet listened to Rebecca Romaine on The Ready Room and her connection with her and her husband's immigrant parents in this, it's very powerful, very moving. This is a Trek for all time, so I cannot wait to hear you guys discuss. Hope you and yours are well.
All right, Abby, just giving a good rundown of what we've talked about so far, but man, I think it's time to talk about Robert April, who did look fantastic in his dress uniform as well. I loved the little extra insignia. I'm sure we'll see so many different versions of those as people start to make them here going forward. But so yeah, that was I'm glad they threw that tension in there between April and Pike and the cross-examination of him. It was just so well done.
To have April basically say to Pike's face, like, you screwed this up. Okay. Like that. I mean, that's
Screwed
stuff
it up
like
so
you were
bad,
saying,
I don't
John.
even want your whiskey. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't get that in TNG, right? Like, we would get Picard being scolded by an admiral and then explaining to number one, like, yeah, they're crazy, and they're stuck with their old hatreds. But like, to expand April into a real character, I mean, you don't hire this actor, I believe his name is Adrian Holmes. You don't hire Adrian Holmes to play a bit part, right? Like, you hire him to play somebody that has authority and dignity and presence, and putting him in that uniform. I mean, you guys, like, I think he may have equaled Pike for me as far as like prettiest Starfleet officer in this episode. Because wow,
he doesn't get a lot of chances to smile. Poor April.
I don't know. He's got a Gorn attack to worry about, so
yeah.
He's got a lot on his plate.
Thought that was real interesting because I definitely thought Pike was just gonna kind of chill with his drink and just kind of watch everything go by. And it's like after he walked out of the movie, they were like, "You know how much you paid for these tickets? How dare you walk out?" He was like, "Man, I was gonna try to help you, but you coming after me now, so I got nothing for you." And I think as an audience member, you felt like, "Well, dang, did Pike just screw this up? Like, what's getting ready to happen? Like, did he just mess up?" Because of the way he came in there, and you were so terrified, even though it's stuff going on, with April as well. Like, he's got some secrets, and it's like at that time, it's like, oh gosh, is everything getting ready to fall down on Pike? Like, what's gonna happen? Because we're gonna need him. Like, there's something going on with April. We're gonna need him. So I was like, is everything getting ready to end right here? Coming in. So it's going to be, that was interesting. I like how they gave that little nugget of like, okay, these guys are starting to be on the fringe with each other. Cause one is like, I'm going for my team. The other one's like, you better recognize what side you're on. And so this is going to be real interesting as they keep going throughout the series. I think they made a good like little sneak peek of like, okay, somebody's getting ready to butt heads.
Mm-hmm. And it actually might be our first instance of Pike just failing to make peace, right? Like, he's like, hey man, just let's have a drink about this. We are old friends. And April's like, that's not enough right now. I'm leaving. Like, and that's incredibly human, you know, to the point we've been making this whole episode. These people are so incredibly human, despite being ultra competent, super good looking, very cool people. They still are people, and they have their flaws and they have their sides.
I will say Pike failed to make peace and equality of mercy, but that's a whole nother story. But
it also doesn't count because it's an alternate reality. Go ahead.
I know. I do like that two very important people to Pike, Patel and April, both kind of ripped into him on this episode. It's like, oh yeah, hot-headed captain running off to help his crew. It's like, hey, quit, like, stop it. You're not
Patel
helping things here.
Says to him, you're going to make this about you. And I almost feel like that's the indictment of the cis white male perspective, right? Like, I want to tell someone's story for them. Like, no, you open the stage and you open the Pike and you let the people tell their own stories.
Speaking of which, we do have one more call for tonight on the Open Pike Night Stage.
Hi guys, it's Isaac from Unplanned Trek, and I'm joined by
Jack from 2 Minute Trek.
That's right. We've just literally finished watching that episode, which I'm not going to try to pronounce because of the title of it. But
it was like Astra Aki Kucha.
Astra and Ashton Kutcher.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. What I loved about it was everything. I loved the Spock bit, but what I wanted to point out is
Falcon was great.
Spock mentioned his dad, Sarek,
Yay!
my hero, everybody's dad. So last week we had Amanda mentioned. We've had Sarek mentioned this week. You know what's going to happen in episode 3, baby?
We're going to see them.
What are your thoughts though, Jack?
Well, my question for you is, when you got to see this first, was it 6 episodes?
They've seen the first 6, yeah.
Yeah. I feel like seeing this earlier could have been really cool because this was obviously the big cliffhanger of season 1. I want to know what your reaction was when you first got to see this, because mine was like, this is the best episode ever. But not the best episode ever.
What is the best episode ever?
I don't know.
Well,
next Open Pike, you'll find out maybe.
Oh, wow. Teaser. So thanks for having us on, guys. See you next time. This is Isaac and Jack, closing communications.
I can just picture those two sitting on the couch, handing the microphone back and forth to each other. And it's just, I'm the only one who gets to hear these calls before we play them on the show. And like, I just smile every time I hear that one.
The first time I watched this, I was alone. It was probably 10:30 at night, you know, only light in the room was the monitor, and I was a mess. I mean, I knew that we were going to get a legal episode because they set it up in season 1 and you knew it was coming. And then in the trailers, we had the court-martial bell. And I honestly sat down with my arms crossed like, okay, let's see what you got against Measure of a Man, because Measure of a Man is like one of my favorite episodes. I mean, it's a fan favorite. It's a lot of people's favorite episodes of all time. So I sat down going, all right, what do you got? And I came out of it going, holy crap, Measure of a Man doesn't quite Measure of a Man up to this for me. Just because, and now a big part of that's probably recency bias. But for me, it is the broad nature of this allegory that it's anybody, right? It's anybody who's ever been judged for something that can be seen or can't be seen. And if Star Trek is meant to do anything, it's to make us think about how we live our lives and how we could maybe live up to these paragons of humanity. And so for me, that makes this my favorite episode of Strange New Worlds so far.
So coming off of episode 1, you know, I was ready for getting the full crew together because we didn't have Una and Pike in episode 1. So I was ready for that. And like I said, when it felt like the rest of the crew were going to be working to investigate, I was like, yeah. And then that didn't happen. And I bumped a little bit on just watching the crew watch C-SPAN. But I definitely liked it. I had some issues, like I've mentioned. I think just, I'm a script nerd, so I wanted some of those kind of script beats to get hit. I will say, just jumping a little bit ahead to the rating, I do think hearing all of your calls and listening to Jesse and Ryan, I think my appreciation for it actually has gone up with the second watch and with talking to people and hearing how the nuances worked for them. So thank you.
I did not love the episode the first time I watched it. But with a second and third viewing and with the discussion tonight, I definitely do appreciate it more. The one thing about Measure of a Man is it didn't happen in the first season of TNG. This would have been, I think, even better if it was in season 3 or 4 with 10 episode seasons. Like, I would have liked to have more depth, more time with Una and the crew, and fine with Ghosts of Valyria being that early a grit, like that's great, but I feel like they should have given this another season at least to percolate. Arrest her at the end of season 2, try her at the beginning of season 3. I feel like that might have been more impactful, but this is a fantastic episode of Star Trek through and through.
The one part of that, John, that I found myself agreeing with on my first watch and then went, oh, that's immaterial, was, like, I really wish we'd had more time with Una. But first of all, your point about the episode count is valid, but Measure of a Man is a season 2 episode. So this is it's somewhat comparable, but there were more episodes, to be totally fair. And secondarily, the line that sold me on this of going, you know what, I'm okay, I don't need a bunch of Una, was when, and not in like a don't put Una on the screen way, just like I'm here for this, was when Mbenga says she puts the lives of her crew above her own every time. And I thought back and I went, oh, that's actually totally true. We saw her do it in episode 3. We saw her do it in episode 4.
Yep.
We saw her do it in, I want to say, episode 8, but she wasn't really her. Whatever. Point being, I immediately made me go back and go, did she? And oh, yeah, she totally did. So I hear you, but I feel like the compressed nature of seasons, to your point, might be why they put it this close to the start of the series. But I mean, for me, the actual acting does so much for me. But I mean, I hope we get a legal episode every couple seasons now, and I hope it's always Yetide Badaki.
The way this episode just was, just stayed with me. Like, I still keep thinking about it. I could just keep watching. Like, I could watch it a couple more times because I just want to see the way everybody played off each other, and just the intensity that you feel as an audience member watching something like this that's just well put together where it works on every level. But yeah, I'm gonna go back. Like, I got a ton of homework to do now, in the Trek universe, where I want to go back and finish the screeners and see what's going on. But it's gonna be hard. Like, they gotta come with it if they're gonna beat this episode for me. Like, I really love, like, even compared to season 1, I really love this one. I was just not, when I sat down to watch this episode, I was thinking, oh, they're just gonna do like, blah blah blah, whatever. Maybe Una doesn't get out. It's just gonna be one of those episodes that pass through. I was not expecting it when I hit play. So they're gonna have to come with it if they want to beat this one for me.
That sure sounds like our ratings this week are super easy. Jesse likes this one better than season 1, episode 2. Cam likes it better than season 1, episode 2. Ryan,
season 1. I was coming to say, like, I think 1 was a more fun romp. But
Children of the Comet is a fantastic episode, but man, this is pure Trek. Yeah, this is pure Trek through and through. And so I think we have a consensus this week that season 2, episode 2 is the better of the episode 2s of Strange New Worlds so far.
That might be our first consensus on a rating ever.
Right?
Well, it's easy when it's easier when it's just an up-down rating as opposed to a 1-10 scale.
Yeah.
True, yes.
Ryan, thank you very much for being here with us tonight. What would you like to plug? Tell us about everything you got going on.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. Again, this is just so interesting to me, just to be able to open it up for listeners to be able to give comments, instead of us just do what we do all the time, right? Just reviewing and talking. It's like, you don't get to get their feedback on what they thought and just how impactful it is. So this is really cool. So thank you guys so much for having me. But yeah, Black Girl Nerds, I'm a contributor, podcast host for Black Girl Nerds. We do more of this. We're talking about Star Trek. We talk to different authors and everything. We have a podcast that comes out, new episodes every Monday. And if you're not tired of hearing my voice right now, you get to hear it again. Like most of the time, every Monday, I'm one of the co-hosts. And like I said, we have authors. We have whatever new shows are coming out. The box office is going crazy right now. So we're trying to cover as much of that as we can. And we have a lot of like cast interviews and everything on our Black Girl Nerds YouTube page. Just at Flix Girl, by the way, if you want to check it out. A lot of you got the Star Trek stuff going on. Recently we did a review for like Little Mermaid, Transformers, all that good stuff. So if you guys want to go check it out. But yeah, it's just our perspective. It's adding diversity. You know, it's Black women perspective. Everybody can go check it out, of all races, genders, but it's giving us a platform to kind of use our voices. You know, and sometimes we go off on tangents about hair, about clothes, you know, in these cool, fun sci-fi worlds. So come check it out. We have a good time. And, you know, thank you guys again. It's been a pleasure.
You also did the same press junket with the Strange New Worlds cast as we did. So if you all liked our interviews, go check out Ryan's on that YouTube page he counted.
Jesse, how can our listeners get on the Open Pike Night Stage?
The easiest way to get on the Open Pike Night Stage is to go to openpike.com/join us. You will find a button there that says record. You can get your voicemail directly to us from there. Or if you prefer to have a little higher quality on your voice, you can just record on your computer and send an email with that audio clip to openpike@gmail.com. Remember, please try to keep it under 90 seconds. We do have a little bit of wiggle room to get those edited, but during the season, it's 2 days. The episode comes out and then we record on Sunday. So our time is limited. So as much help as you can give us is great. And I will say, just on this note, thank you so much to everyone who called in tonight. You guys, like, you really do. You make the show. And I think that tonight has been a great example of that.
Yeah. And Venus and Sincere, we will respond to your calls on our Patreon, like I said, and we will make sure you get to see those videos delivered to your inbox as well. Cam, if folks want to find more of you, where can they head?
I'm still working my way through TNG. I've seen a lot of those legal dramas people have mentioned, but we're in the middle of season 6, watching some TNG, also watching DS9 now in our DS9 Minute. You can find that on Green Shirt and Newbies Trek Through the Next Generation, wherever you're listening to this podcast, or follow us at GreenShirt87.
And I run the Open Pike Night TikTok, which has had a decent little success lately with some of our Pelia content. And I will say one of my favorite comments from there was when somebody said, man, I would love Jet Reno and Pelia interact. It's like, oh, that could actually happen.
It
like,
could.
Pelia could show up in Discovery Season 5 legitimately with not having to do any twisting whatsoever. It's like, no, she just lives that long. And that would be
so bad.
That would be fantastic. Otherwise, I can be found on Twitter at John T. Bolds. Jesse, where else can folks find you?
You can find me arguing with trolls on Twitter as well at Open Pike or on Blue Sky under the same name. You can also follow the show on Instagram at Open Pike, or you can watch us along with subtitles at youtube.com/@OpenPike. Now, if you have been following those socials, you may have noticed we are giving away some pins thanks to our friends at Heroes in Action. We have 4 pins to give away, 1 for Twitter, 1 for Instagram, 1 for Facebook, and 1 for TikTok. So look out for those posts and get entered. We're already north of 30 or 40 entries, so you're going to want to get in on that soon. Another thing you can get in on pretty quickly, as I mentioned before, is our apron giveaway for patrons. The apron is signed by Anson Mount and Ethan Peck. We have photographic proof of that happening, and you can become a patron for as little as $2 a month. So you could pay $2 and then get a piece of signed merchandise that has the captain and first officer on it. That's pretty cool. The drawing for that is coming up at the end of the season, so don't forget to become a patron.
It may even have a few more signatures on it by the time you receive it, so just throwing that out there. We don't know what might happen between now and then.
You never know. You could be getting barbecue sauce over the entire Enterprise cruise names.
And if you prefer to get your Open Pike Night news delivered directly to your inbox, the easiest way to do that is to go to openpike.substack.com and sign up for our free newsletter that gets you all of the news on who is coming in, what kind of help we need with the next episode. And again, it goes straight to your inbox. You don't even have to think about it. You can sign up your friends for it. They don't even have to open it. But we would love if you did that.
And where can folks find you if they're tired of hearing about Star Trek, Jesse?
I don't want to know you, but you can go download episodes of my old podcast, Sudden But Inevitable, which was responsible earlier for John's slight misspeaking. It does cover Firefly, as the title might indicate, as well as other single season shows that got canceled before their time that I feel just deserve new and bigger audiences. Shows like Cowboy Bebop. We did a few movies. We found somebody who had never seen Donnie Darko, so that was a pretty good episode. If you like to hear people get forced to like stuff, check out Sudden But Inevitable.
Well, it's been a long night, and the Open Pike Night crew is very sorry you had to witness this outburst. Be sure to clean up after yourselves. Be sure to tip your servers. You can go anywhere you want, but you can't stay here.